The evening sun bled gold across the wide, empty land. Shadows of cattle stretched long, and the air smelled faintly of dust and sagebrush. A rancher, a man hardened by years of work and silence, guided his horse down the dirt road that led home. The rhythm of hooves against the earth was steady, almost meditative, until something on the horizon broke the pattern. At first, he thought it was nothing, just shapes against the fading light. But as he drew closer, the shapes shifted into something unmistakable. Two figures huddled beneath the dry skeleton of a tree. They looked small, fragile, like ghosts of people who had been forgotten by the world. The rancher slowed his horse, his brow furrowed beneath the brim of his hat. He was not a man easily moved, but there was something about the stillness of those figures that pulled at him. When he stopped a few feet away, he saw them clearly. A woman, her face drawn and pale, and beside her, a little girl no older than 7. Their clothes were torn, their shoes worn through. Dust clung to their hair, and hunger was etched into their cheeks. The woman tried to rise when she saw him, but her body betrayed her. She sank back against the tree, exhausted beyond words. The girl, however, stood. She wobbled a little, her knees trembling, but she lifted her chin with a courage that seemed far too large for her small frame. The rancher dismounted slowly, boots crunching on gravel. He didn't speak at first. Words were not his way. He studied the girl. Her eyes were wide and too bright, filled with both fear and something stronger. He waited for her to say something, and she did. Her voice was fragile, like glass on the edge of breaking. "Sir," she whispered, glancing once at her mother, before turning back to him. Can you take her instead of me? Please, my mama is tired. Take her, not me." The rancher froze. The words hung in the air, heavy and piercing. He had heard many things in his life, men bargaining for cattle, women crying for sons lost in war, neighbors begging for rain. But never had he heard a child offer herself away so her mother could live. Her little hands clutched at the hem of her tattered dress as though bracing herself for rejection. The woman stirred weakly, her lips parting as if to protest, but no sound came out. Her eyes, sunken and rimmed with sorrow, filled with tears. She had no strength to stop her daughter from speaking. The rancher's throat tightened. His silence stretched, but not because he didn't understand. It was because he understood too much. This was not a simple request. This was sacrifice, pure and raw, spoken by a child who should have been worrying about dolls and ribbons, not life and death. He crouched down to the girl's level. His shadow fell across her face, and for a moment, all he did was look at her. Her tiny frame trembled, under the weight of her own words, but she didn't back away. She believed in what she was asking. The rancher said nothing. Not because he didn't care, but because he couldn't trust his voice to carry the weight of the moment. Instead, he reached forward, rough hands trembling slightly, and without a single word, he lifted the girl into his arms. She stiffened, startled but didn't resist. He could feel her heartbeat, fast, desperate, beneath her ribs. Then he turned to the woman. She tried to protest, shaking her head, but before she could say anything, he stooped again and gently lifted her too. Her body was frail, light as though the world had already stripped her of everything. The rancher carried them both to his horse. His silence was not indifference, it was reverence. Some moments are too sacred for words. As he placed them carefully in the saddle, the little girl's eyes searched his face. For the first time, she let out a shaky breath. She had offered herself up, but he had taken both. And that choice, that silence, was louder than any promise. The wind whispered through the fields as the horse turned back toward the ranch. And behind them, the lonely tree stood still, as if watching over the place where a child's plea had been answered with more kindness than she had dared to hope for. The journey back to the ranch was long, the horse moving at a steady, careful pace under the weight of 3 souls. The rancher rode with the woman leaning against his chest, her breath shallow and uneven, while the little girl clung tightly to his sleeve. She didn't speak. Her tiny fingers curled into the fabric as if afraid he might disappear if she let go. The ranch stretched wide and silent when they arrived. Its fences lined the horizon, its barns and sheds bathed in the last light of dusk. It wasn't much to look at. Weathered wood, rusting hinges, and windows smudged with dust. But it was home. Or rather, it had been only his home for many years, echoing with silence. Tonight, that silence was about to be broken. He dismounted carefully, first lowering the little girl to the ground. She looked around nervously, her wide eyes darting across the unfamiliar space. Then he turned to the woman. She stirred, weakly, trying to protest, but her body gave her no choice. He lifted her again with quiet strength and carried her through the old wooden door of the ranch house. The air inside smelled faintly of cedar and old tobacco. Dust floated in the streaks of fading light that filtered through the windows. For years, the rancher had lived here alone, with only the sound of boots on floorboards and the creak of wind against the shutters to keep him company. Now, two strangers, two fragile lives, lay under his roof. He laid the woman gently on a cot near the fireplace, the warmest corner of the room. Her breathing was shallow but steady. The girl followed close behind, her bare feet hesitant on the wooden floor. She stood quietly, watching him, waiting for what he would do next. The rancher moved to the kitchen without a word. He lit the old oil lamp, its glow spilling soft light across the room. Then he fetched bread, a pitcher of water, and a small pot of beans he had left from his supper. The girl's eyes widened at the sight of food, but she didn't reach for it until he placed the plate before her. "Eat," he said simply, his voice low and rough, the first word he had spoken to them. She looked at him, unsure, then at her mother. The woman gave the faintest nod, and only then did the girl take a piece of bread. She ate slowly at first, as if afraid it might vanish, then faster as hunger overtook her. The rancher set another plate by the cot, helping the woman sip water. She whispered something, soft, almost inaudible, but her lips trembled with gratitude. The little girl wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and finally spoke again. "Thank you, sir." The rancher met her gaze. Her eyes were clearer, now though still rimmed with exhaustion. He gave a small nod but said nothing more. He wasn't a man of speeches. His actions had always been louder than his words. Later that night, as the fire crackled, the woman fell into a deep, much-needed sleep. The girl sat by her side, keeping watch like a tiny soldier guarding the only person she had left. The rancher brought her a blanket, draping it over her shoulders. She looked up at him, startled at first, then relaxed when she saw the kindness in his face. "Are we safe here?" she asked in a whisper, almost afraid of the answer. The rancher crouched down, his weathered face close to hers. He didn't give her a long explanation, nor did he make promises he couldn't keep. He simply nodded, once, firmly. The girl's shoulders loosened. For her, that single gesture was enough. As the hours passed, the house seemed to change. Where once there had been only silence, there was now the soft rhythm of 2 extra heartbeats. The girl's quiet humming as she fought sleep, the woman's faint breathing as she dreamed. These sounds filled the old ranch with a life it hadn't known in years. The rancher sat by the fire, his hat resting on his knee, staring into the flames. He didn't ask who they were or where they had come from. That story could wait. All he knew was this: a choice had been laid before him on a dusty road, and tonight he had chosen not to look away. Outside, the wind whistled across the empty fields, but inside, for the first time in a very long time, the ranch was not empty. And as the little girl finally drifted to sleep beside her mother, still holding her sleeve in her tiny fist, the rancher realized something he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't alone anymore. The weeks that followed unfolded slowly, like the turning of seasons. The woman regained her strength bit by bit, her cheeks filling with color again, her voice no longer just a whisper carried by the wind. Each morning she sat by the window of the ranch house, staring out at the rolling fields as though she still couldn't believe they had a roof over their heads. Sometimes she would hum softly, half-forgotten lullabies that had lived only in her memory until now. The little girl, however, bloomed the fastest. Her fear gave way to laughter, her small voice filling the house with a kind of music the rancher hadn't heard in years. She followed him around the ranch, her bare feet pattering after his heavy boots. She asked questions about the horses, the cattle, even the fences he built. Every answer he gave, no matter how simple, lit up her eyes as if he'd just told her. A secret meant only for her. The neighbors noticed the change. They had grown used to the rancher's solitude, his quiet manner, the way his land seemed to echo his loneliness. But now, when they passed by, they heard the faint ring of laughter. They saw a child darting through the fields with her arms spread wide like wings. They saw the woman hanging linens in the sun, smiling softly at the girls' games. The rancher himself didn't say much, but when people greeted him at the market, they swore his eyes were softer, less burdened. At night, when the house settled into silence, the rancher sometimes found himself sitting at the table, watching the girl sleep, with her head on her mother's lap by the fire. He thought of her words on that first night. Take her instead of me. The memory always cut deep. A child should never have to think that way, never have to believe she was less important than the one she loved. And yet, she had said it, with such courage, such selflessness, that it had changed him. One evening, after supper, the girl came up to him while he was polishing his saddle. She held a small flower in her hand, plucked from the edge of the field. "This is for you," she said shyly, offering it to him. The rancher paused. His rough, calloused hand reached out slowly to take it. He turned the fragile blossom between his fingers, its petals delicate against his hardened skin. Something stirred in him, something he had long thought dead. He nodded once, his voice low but steady. "Thank you," the girl beamed, and in that smile, the rancher saw the quiet truth he had been avoiding. He hadn't just taken them in, they had taken him in too. They had filled the emptiness of his house, and without realizing it, the emptiness of his heart. The woman, now strong enough to move freely about the house, often caught him watching the child. She never spoke of it, but her eyes glistened with silent gratitude. She knew that in saving them, the rancher had found a piece of himself he'd lost. By the time spring rolled across the land, the ranch looked different. Flowers bloomed where weeds once grew. The laughter of a little girl rang across the fields like church bells on a Sunday morning. The woman's gentle presence softened every corner of the home. And the rancher, though still a man of few words, found himself no longer weighed down by silence. He hadn't chosen between them that night under the dying tree. He had chosen both. And in that choice, he discovered something far greater than mercy. He discovered family. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more heart-touching stories.